harps were loved and honoured by the people of ancient Ireland. They played in the palaces of kings, of chieftains and of nobles, and played in the courts, and were deeply honoured as professional harpers. But by the end of the 18th century, times had changed, and so did the lives of the harpers change. And they were forced to go as itinerants, travelling on horseback with the harp, but they were welcomed into the big houses all around Ireland. And here they would play their beautiful airs, and they would sometimes take pupils. Now, harpers usually were children who were blind from birth, and they began their training at the age of 10, and from then on they became professional harpers, playing, as I said, in different places. And one, of course, the best known is Turlough O'Carolan, whom we have a great debt. We owe him for all these beautiful airs and tunes that he has been passed down and played by present-day harpists. But in 1792, Carolan died in 1738, but in 1792, 10 harpers gathered together in Belfast for the Great Assembly of Harpers. And very fortunately, there was the marvellous collector of Irish music, Bunting. He was there, and he noted down all their tunes and airs. And were it not for him and for that wonderful assembly, 220 years later, we would not have these tunes, and we do, which is wonderful, and you will hear Carolan's tunes later, played by Cormac.
So yeah, that's Glynis was saying there about the harpers. My grandmother was one of 6 children, 5 girls and 1 boy, and their parents were Kathleen and Sean P. O'Shea from Skibbereen in Cork, but they actually met in Birmingham in England. They both left separate, independently of each other, and at a Gaelic League meeting, they were both in learning Irish in Birmingham, and that's where they met. So they came home and raised their 6 children Irish speaking, and I don't know, there must have been money in the family in those days, because my great grandfather bought them all a harp, all 5 daughters, and my grand uncle got to be the harp carrier. Uncle Finn got to be the harp carrier. He was their roadie. But it's funny, in 1942, at the 150th anniversary, I don't know if anybody here, there's a lovely harp maker called Colm O'Macher up in Marley Park. Well, Colm's father was in the army, and he was in the barracks I think he was in Mullingar at the time, or wherever he was. But he called up my grandparents, or my great-grandparents were up in Dundrum, in the Goatstown side of it now. They had a big estate in those days. It's called Corcogina. It's long gone. But he knocked on their door. Literally, he told me the story before he passed away, and he invited the 4 O'Shea sisters who were playing at the time to perform the only commemoration of the 150th anniversary of Belfast. It was the 4 O'Shea sisters.
And it's interesting that Roisin and my father, the last time they met, was the celebration of the bicentenary. They were both playing in the National Museum in Kildare Street, and both played their harps and that. So it's very fitting that was the last time that they were together.
It's 20 years later now again, isn't it? I know. We're celebrating again. But the one thing, my one rebellion was that I never sang the harp. My grandmother was determined to get me to sing, and I refused point blank. But we used to do, I used to accompany her, and we had a great occasion, we had an opportunity to play together in the concert hall. Myself and my mother, who also plays, and my grandmother, so we all got to perform the 3 generations. But it's great, isn't it? And towards the end of her life then, she wouldn't, some of the words were failing her, but she would always have the tune and the rhythm. And she would hum along whenever she would, but this piece, I'll do a song for you now called Pishdan Enaid, which is yet another unrequited love song. She got left and deserted, and he ran off, promised he'd show up and didn't. But in those days I used to accompany her, but I'll give it I'll try it myself.
Of course.